mistake or made this decision in a past life where, I've hired to build out a security program, from scratch. I've hired the one-man shop kind of thing, or one-woman shop, right? And I don't know how realistic that really is, to have one person kind of come in and do a whole bunch of things and really establish a program, versus what you really need to do to effectively manage risk is you need fractional of a lot of things, right? Mm-hmm. You need the fractional governance, CISO aspect. You need fractional, monitoring. You need, whole slew of skills that, to sort of bring everything together.
A lot of these now.
We are the Keyboard Samurai, podcast about the business of cyber and tech. Here to help you or your business improve. Here's your host, Will Clue. Let's hack into it now. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Another awesome, exciting episode. As always, like, subscribe, all that BS. Help the channel. So today I get to bring back one of my buddies, Chris, and his partner in crime, one of his partners in crime, Steve. So Chris, I'll let you start, and then Steve, you guys each give us the 20 seconds of who you are and why we care.
Absolutely. I love the why we care. It always gets me. Yeah. Partner in crime. Absolutely. So yeah, when we last did a pod together, Will, I was more of a free agent. Now at this point, I've moved to work more full-time with Steve as his head of marketing. So basically my background is on the marketing and growth side, right? Last 5 years, 6 years or so, I've worked primarily with cybersecurity, early stage startups, ones that are really looking to grow and helping them build out that growth marketing function. I am going to be talking from time to time today, obviously, to anyone who knows me, but I am going to be a bit more of a listener on this one. This is more of Steve's conversation. Steve is my boss, the CEO and founder of Defensible Technology. I'm not going to go into any more and intro him further than I already have, but that's why I'm here. I'm just pumped to be a part of this conversation. I think it's an important one that we'll be having, and yeah, just ready to dig in. Steve.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. So Steve Doty, I'm founder of Defensible Technology. We are a cybersecurity consulting firm with an array of services, from advisory, risk assessment, pen testing, all the way through IT consulting and functioning as your help desk. So I think we're unique in the marketplace in that we cover everything from answering an IT support call all the way through digital forensics and incident response. So happy to meet everybody. And, my background, I've been in IT and cyber for a long time at this point, since the mid 90s as a network engineer, configuring firewalls and, back when that was cybersecurity, and spent almost a decade with a Big Four consulting firm, almost a decade with an incident response and forensics firm. And for the past 6 years, I've been out on my own.
Nice. Yeah, it'll be good. So we have a lot of MSPs, MSSP people, I think, that listen. So it'll be useful. So yeah, as we were getting ready, trying to figure out, hey, what are we talking about? We kind of talked about this idea of, SaaS organizations, or just in general startups, right? They have this complex landscape. It's complex enough just getting through their product, their technology, and all the go-to-market they have to do to even be able to sell something, right? Or even get some free, design partners. Then they want to go out and sell to organizations, and then they have these requirements for things like SOC 2 or whatever else, vendor risk management, GPRM kind of stuff. And so we're kind of talking about that growth around those organizations. I guess, Chris or Steve, I'll let you decide who wants to answer first. Like, what's the kind of initial signal that they kind of run into when they realize that I kind of haven't prepared for this, or I'm kind of growing too fast and I need some help?
I can answer that from, let's say, more of the go-to-market perspective, right? And I'll have Steve weigh in on his perspective. And obviously there's variations and there's differences, but oftentimes a lot of this comes into the equation when there's a certain level of growth that a company is in order to go from where they are now. And I could throw arbitrary dollar thresholds. I don't think that would be helpful. I mean, probably at least 10. I'll throw out.
Well, we all know. I know where they're at. It's at 5 million to you get to 10 million, and then it's like 20 million, and then 50. Like, that's about where you have to invest money and realize there's going to be a loss before you can kind of go back up, right?
Yeah, and it makes sense. And to your point, right? At some point, the growth the next phase of growth from most of these companies is going to be unlocked is when are they able to attract enterprise buyers. Obviously, I don't care really what it is you do for a living, but ultimately, as you grow, you need to be doing business with less people and larger companies, right? Whether you're an agency or any type of it's just the right approach, right? And the problem is for these types of companies is that, you know, when you are in the growth at all costs stage, which I know we don't necessarily think of it anymore, VCs aren't printing money and it's not growing on trees like it was in 2020 and 2021. But regardless,
I don't know. In cyber, I mean, like seed rounds are like $50 million now or something.
well, I mean, to be fair, yeah. I mean, who did I see today? I think it was it Upwind? I think got 250 million for Series B. So that there is cyber is healthy as it should be for reasons that I think everyone on this meeting and anyone that is listening would know, right? But ultimately, though, to grow, you have to do business with bigger customers, right? And bigger customers for a lot of different reasons, you know, mainly shareholder implications and things like that. There is a lot more rigors and, standards that you need to have in terms of how, from the way I use it as a non-security person, how you manage and secure your technology and what that looks like. So I'll pause there and pass it to Steve for his perspective.
Yeah, I'm seeing sort of the same thing even within our existing client base. I mean, the early sort of indicator is, you know, question coming from the CEO or the COO saying, hey, you know, we're getting, in order to bid on some of this larger business, you know, our clients are putting a SOC 2 kind of requirement on us, right? So can you help us with that? So, and typically what I see is, you know, the organizations are in okay shape. You know, there's a little bit of sort of cleanup and some enhancement of policies and documentation and those sorts of things to get that SOC 2 certification. But there's a big difference between, sort of enabling the go-to-market through a SOC 2 certifications. I don't want to call SOC 2 just a marketing kind of thing, but there's certainly
a report, to be fair.
Yeah.
It's not a cert, but
but it what I find is, you know, we're able to help customers with that, you know, enable getting larger enterprise size clients, but at the same time, it opens the door for risk-based conversations with the customer as they start to think about, you know, Will, you said sort of that 5, 10, 20 million, right? Sort of tiering, you know, SOC 2 is kind of the starting point, but a more comprehensive cybersecurity program, especially for these SaaS businesses where they're developing custom code, you know, oftentimes maybe they've run the code through some form of a web application pen test in the past. You know, maybe that pen test has been more of a check the box kind of pen test. Maybe it's been more of a, you know, pre and post authentication and really diving into, the application logic and finding vulnerabilities that could get them in trouble down the road. So again, sort of that SOC 2 is sort of a starting point conversation, but for us as a consulting firm, it helps us open the door and really engage the executive leadership in the risk-based conversation.
Yeah, I like to say compliance is the floor, not the goal, right?
Yep.
And
absolutely.
And it's, you know, it's interesting, Chris, what you said about the enterprise space. I think at the heart of what you're saying, I kind of agree. I don't think everybody has to work for the enterprise, but if you're selling to smaller mid-market businesses, you're going to have a channel because you can't hire enough people. And then that effectively is you working with an enterprise because you're going to go to one of these big 3-letter resellers. And guess what? You're going to need a SOC 2. And you're going to have probably some other vendor risk management program where you're going to have to answer a bunch of stuff. And I don't know if they didn't know, here where I'm at in Pennsylvania, the state was like they had, if you want to be on the contract to sell, you got to go, there's all these hoops you have to jump through. And there's definitely considerations for basically just being like, if you have a SOC 2, that's all you need. Just to simplify the due diligence for them because they have so many vendors, right? And I know I've talked back in my past, I had a healthcare client who had like 10,000 vendors. And when you have that many vendors, you have to have a tiered program that makes it easy to manage. And you're one of those vendors to that organization, and SOC 2 is great, it gets you in the door. But to your point, Steve, you have to start building actual cybersecurity after that, right?
Yep. Yeah, one of the conversations, I typically have with either existing clients or prospects, sort of relating some of the headline data breaches of the past, tend to be credit card exposures and things of that nature. So I try to put like SOC 2 in the context of PCI or payment card industry, that all of these, whether it's the historical Target, Home Depot, Marriott, you name, the retail exposure breach of your choice, but they were all compliant with with PCI frameworks and things of that nature. So I use that as a conversation starter to help the executive leadership sort of think about the difference, as you say, the floor with compliance, and then building true cybersecurity from there.
I think we're going to see CMMC do the same thing that PCI did. That's just kind of the same thing we saw in HIPAA. It was like HIPAA first and PCI, now it's CMMC, where you have this, everybody scrambling to get compliant because they realize they have to do it. And then, okay, we've got this. And then now it's sort of stable and it repeatable, right? Because a lot of times once you find out you have this compliance thing you have to do, then you rush to get it done and you realize all the things you weren't doing. But then, to your point, Steve, then the ideal thing, and I would do the same thing, is like, okay, now let's start talking about the actual risk to your company, right? Now we've identified the assets that are critical, and we identified what you need to run your business, how you make your money. What are you actually doing to protect them, right? Are you able to, because that's the other thing, like, again, the SOC 2 is a report, and all it really does is say you do what you say you're going to do. So you could literally say, we don't use passwords. And the report's going to say verified. They don't use passwords. It doesn't equate to being secure. It just means that you do the things you say. So you have to look at it the right way. And as somebody who has to read those reports from time to time, they're not fun.
Agreed. Yeah, I will say one of the things that's evolved over the past number of years that I think is helpful, a lot of these sort of SOC 2 automation tools have gotten better in that, the evidence, they automate some of the evidence collection. And, that's nice and all, but in order to collect that evidence, the tool will connect into AWS or your Jira system or your GitHub repository, those sorts of tools that are enabling you to develop your platform. And the technical controls that are now being built into that, again, you can sort of manage which controls are going to be in scope and out of scope and those sorts of things to manage the process. But that core capability to do a little bit of a deeper dive into how the business is actually operating its technology has been helpful, because it enables you as a consultant to kind of draw out some of that conversation to say, hey, you know what, you've been running in AWS, but are you keeping the logs? Do you have Guard Duty and CloudTrail and these sort of systems enabled? And some clients do, some do not, some have never heard of it. But again, it sort of facilitates that conversation to move towards a more mature approach, as you sort of scale and grow that business.
It's interesting as I think about, I don't know how this would work for SaaS companies or pure tech companies, but I know, having worked at some service firms, we would get our just the SOC would be, and the managed services element would be ISO compliant, 27001, and SOC compliant. You don't have to worry about everything else, right? Because that was the service we were selling. That was the thing that needed to be. So you can, similar to the way you would segment your PCI environment or your CMMC environment to make it easier. I don't know from a technology perspective you can do that, because the code is the code, right?
Yeah. I know, Chris, one of the things you and I have sort of tossed around as an idea and a concept is, we're kind of talking about maturing a cybersecurity program from compliance all the way, from upward from there. Is there a role for sort of a turnkey, secured startup in a box kind of solution? Is something I know, Chris, you and I have kind of talked about, and we haven't sort of had gone down the path of creating that yet, but I think it's an interesting concept. Can you sort of package your SOC 2, your baseline policy set, your baseline web application pen test into here's what you need to kind of get going and get off the ground as a startup, so you're not facing that at the $5 or $10 million mark down the road. You've sort of built that in from the beginning.
I think that's kind of the basis for some of the, I won't name names, some of the companies out there that kind of focus on SOC 2 is, hey, we have everything kind of out of the box for you.
Yeah.
I also have a buddy who made an incredible, like the most amazing GRC tool I've ever seen. And you can literally just put everything into it, and the AI is just amazing. So like you can just live in it, like day to day. Like it's not just, hey, help you get compliant, but it's that problem we talked about, like day to day, you know, how do we keep improving? Well, okay, once we got the SOC 2, we're good. Well, day to day as a CISO or as the program manager, whatever it is, I have to drive this program. I have to, you know, get more mature. I have to care about things. And in his tool, you could just live in it and just be like, yeah, check this, do that. It has some, anyway, this is not a pitch for his tool, but my point being, there's like, you know, there is technology out there to kind of make this easier. And I think the idea of something in a box is definitely the case. Also, I had this conversation just a couple of sessions ago. I remember in like, I want to say like early 2000s, I read some article from some guy in Harvard who had basically equated that IT was going to become just like electricity. Meaning back in the day, you used to have to get a box from GE and you got the power and all that. And soon it would just be ubiquitous and everywhere, and you wouldn't need IT people. It would just be part of the world. And I think at the time I laughed and thought that was crazy, but now I look around now and I'm like, it's not far off. And security will be coming right behind that, because as we get security built into which is what we all have asked for as security leaders, like it should be part of all your business processes. Security should be part of everything. Well, the more and more that happens, the less the specialized security team needs to exist.
Oh, that's the same. The quick go to market, right? It's the same thing in marketing, right? Hold on, I'm blanking on that for a second. What I was meaning to say, what I was getting at, so funny, totally spaced out. But the way that I look at it too, like you're saying, you were talking about before, running into these issues at the 5 or 10 yard line or something like that. It's like, so, right, marketing and sales and all of these different functions now live cohesively in one go-to-market function for modern companies, right? For companies that are doing go-to-market right, they realize, well, we can't have all of these revenue-generating aspects of our functions living independently. Marketing, sales, CS, product. Modern companies that run modern go-to-market plays actually package these together, right? I feel like and this is don't get me wrong, this is a little bit of a messaging thing that we're playing around with at Defensible, but I feel like security, yes, I'm bought into it. Security and technology, they're a part of your growth as much as anything is. And if we're going to have those 4 things packaged into the 4 pillars of go-to-market, why is not technology one of those components? We think of the tech of the product that we create and that we push to grow, but like how we are managing that internally, how are we securing that internally? We're removing friction in all those other areas, but are we really focusing on this one if it's living outside of that revenue generating silo? That's something that's been on my mind a lot lately. Go-to-market is always evolving, as it should, and I feel like this part of it is as instrumental to it as any other part of it, and is being perceived, from what I can tell, not like that whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it firsthand positioned as a differentiator for sure. So like CMMC as an example, I knew an organization that had because of their compliance, they were winning bigger contracts and bigger deals. So then they go to their 200 vendors and say, hey, you guys need to get compliant. And they go, well, we don't really want to do that, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, fine, we'll just buy you. Because now we have so much money because we're doing it. And I've also seen the opposite too, where I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was like, you know, have you thought about CMMC? He's like, I make this one thing like this. I make this little widget handle, whatever it is. And it goes to I don't even know what it goes to or where it goes. He's like, screw that. No, I'm not dealing with it. Right. But also that guy in that situation probably doesn't need that much. He probably can take, you know, an out of the box policy, you know, make sure that he's got, you know, his 3 or 4 computers and whatever else, you know, his small team is secured it, and go ahead and be compliant. That's the other thing too. I think a lot of people get scared off by compliance too.
Yeah. Yep. And we sort of talked a little bit about kind of an adjacent space there, right? This third-party risk management, which is, I guess it's along compliance, but it's another area where I think as companies grow, there's opportunity to and need to mature, that process. I mean, I've been through as a fractional CISO or for customers, I don't know how and internally working in past life functions, I had a full head of hair when I started with,
Yeah.
filling out these 400 row Excel sheets, and that space has sort of evolved into a beast of its own. But one of the things I'm seeing with a number of customers as they grow and scale and start to take on clients that are more global, there's a need to really do more on the third party risk space, right? So if you're starting to work with vendors overseas, and I have one customer that's growing out their EMEA footprint, right? So now you need to look at those vendors because and they're sort of lesser known vendors, from what we typically see for U.S. based companies, right? So putting an additional focus on that vendor risk space as you grow and scale, I think is critical as well, and that's something we do with our tabletops, incident response tabletop exercises. Have a third party risk scenario, right, to kind of run through, and it's typically eye opening for for the non technology folks that don't necessarily understand that if you're engaging this third party vendor and you're storing data in their system, that you still own the obligation, right? It's still your data, your customers, and those sorts of things. So again, it's sort of this maturity sort of scale where you can start with that SOC 2 and then open up these sort of risk-based conversations and really open up the thinking of some of the executive teams as to where their exposure may be, that they haven't really thought of.
Yeah, it's a great point on the third party. Big proponent of third party risk, for always have been. But you don't even have to be in tech. Like I fractional VC sewed for a smaller firm that was in like printing, right? But they had a very, very large global client. And so they got the 200 and something questions every year. They had to answer it. And they were told you need to have a SOC. This was, back in the day when they either, if you have a SOC 2 or an ISO 27001, but this was a time when an ISO certification was going to cost you $100,000. And that's like, it's not going to happen, right? Like, so it was always a matter of the onus is on you. And I think that's the point I'm getting at, is we would always have to come back and say, what we're doing isn't that big of a deal. The data you're giving us isn't that sensitive. But at the end of the day, like for them, like some of the data points were like account numbers, not like bank account numbers, like their account numbers. And they considered that sensitive data, even though most compliance frameworks wouldn't call it that, right? It wouldn't be like PII or something, but because they classified it as such, and the way that their systems were set up, they're like, oh, we're giving you sensitive data. So there are all these extra controls and things that they had to have in place. And then again, of course, they're having vendors also. So we had to build a whole risk program for them. And again, this is a small 30, 40 person company that's not in the SaaS technology startup space, just doing day-to-day, like, no IT staff, they have an MSP sort of person outsourcing, and me being the CISO for the company when they need it, right? So you can't escape this, I think is the point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just the perception. So one of the things I'll typically do with customers as well is pull down their, or ask them to do it, because they can get the report from Security Scorecard or BitSite, just to kind of take the pulse as to what does the outside world potentially view of your security posture. And you have to take those reports with a grain of salt. Right?
Yeah, especially if it's just a static website that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get that back, and it's like, look at all the stuff that's wrong with it. I think that site doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. It's not connected to anything. Who cares?
Yeah. But it's about managing the perception, right?
Yeah.
The optics of that, can be important. So, that's it's something that I think is going to continue to evolve. The other, I've seen with global clients, incorporating into, when you're operating in certain parts of the world, you may want to run your vendors through like an OFAC sanctions list and things of that nature as well, which are, not, it's sort of an edge case for, third party risk, but again, as you go global and scale, that kind of thing can become important.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I think at some point that sort of external view of your, like, that's that's an area we're going to see mature. I think the technology's there to do something better than just kind of evaluate your website, but actually look at your business. Like I know when I worked for a company, we had an attack surface tool. A lot of the stuff we did was, we had M&A information, so we could also take the data from the companies that they had bought in the past, and then take a look at that through the dark web and see what was going on. And then, you've got your executive LLCs and all that. So there's a way that you can kind of combine all that and get beyond the, hey, we're just looking at your website. So I expect that to get a lot better. And that's actually a pretty opportune area for anybody who's looking to start a business. If you can find a way to give valuable data to that perspective, that would definitely help. Because I know I've done presentations and I've had kind of literal CEO or CIO, CISO or whatever in the room and say, I got the board asking me about this website review, and all they care about is us getting that fixed. And I can't explain to them that it doesn't matter. Right? They're saying we have these vulnerabilities, but again, it's a static site, or there's no actual web app, because of the way it's done. And I'm like, well, I was like, it's too, you need to fix it so that they're happy, because it does project what the business looks like. But at the same time, this is also a good point for you to have a conversation with them and help them understand what risk is about. So it is a double, I guess the point being, same with a SOC 2 or anything else that you're asked to do. If the business wants you to do it, you have to either do it or figure out a way to make them understand.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think this attack surface management space is sort of ripe for some innovation there and some real value, as opposed to sort of some of this more superficial value that's out there.
Oh, that's good stuff. So what kind of all right, so we've got organizations leveling up. I guess, where do you sit on the, when does a startup need a CISO?
That's a great
That's
question.
an interesting question. I'm obviously biased in that we provide, fractional CISO or virtual CISO type services. So, I'll just sort of caveat that. I think one of the things I'm not really a fan of, and I've made this, I don't know if it's a mistake or made this decision in a past life where, I've hired to build out a security program, from scratch. I've hired the one-man shop kind of thing, or one-woman shop, right? And I don't know how realistic that really is. To have one person kind of come in and do a whole bunch of things and really establish a program, versus what you really need to do to effectively manage risk is you need fractional of a lot of things, right? Mm-hmm. You need the fractional governance, CISO aspect. You need fractional, monitoring. You need, sort of a whole slew of skills that, to sort of bring everything together. So with that context, I think you're probably in the several hundred employees before you really require, an internal, CISO. But the tricky part being, as soon as you're doing any reasonable amount of business, you need all of the capabilities that a CISO and a security program bring. Right. So that's the tricky part, is how do you really balance that fractionalized approach with when do you need a full-time sort of effort, if you will.
Yeah. Well, no, and as you were saying that, it made me think about, and I think this is good for business leaders to consider, is, what is that first hire going to be? Because if your first hire is going to be a CISO, then you're looking for a hands-on CISO, which I hate that term, right? Yeah. But I guess the point being, if you need somebody to do things and push buttons, that's very different than somebody who's going to build a program and run and manage that. And you need to know starting off what path you're going down, because if you bring in, hey, you're the first person, you're going to be the security team and you're going to grow it and lead it. But if they're a button pusher and they're not able to make that conversion into the executive role when the time needs to be, then you have to hire outside. And, so is it hey, you're going to do a little hands-on now and then become, we're going to get you trained up, or is it we're going to bring you in and then fractionalize or manage services, the other thing. So I think understanding that path, because I've seen a lot of those job descriptions where it's like player coach, whatever you want to say, right? We need you to do and lead, and you're going to get to grow the whole team. And those skills aren't always the same.
Yep, exactly. And then someone, a skilled CISO that's an effective executive at the governance layer, is likely going to want to bring in a team over time, and you have to sort of pre-plan for that if that's going to be the case, and be clear when you're hiring for that role that, hey, this is a one-person show for the first 2-3 years, and you're expected to be hands-on, or there's an expectation that, yes, we're hiring you to build a team, and you're going to tell us what that team should look like.
I'm on your side with that too, as a consultant myself and living in that world. That's where you take advantage of that stuff. Like, let the consulting orgs help you identify. I mean, I've written job descriptions and done interviews and help with staffing models. Like, it's they live in the world. Like, it's one of those things. Just pay somebody for it. Like, it'll be easier.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, so Chris.
Yeah,
from the GTM side of things, thinking about the cybersecurity aspect, whether it's compliance or whether it's like we talked about, having some value add with it, like how does that play into the GTM strategy for these organizations as they're looking to grow?
I mean, here's a funny example, and it's a bit of an extreme one, but it's something that I know I wouldn't want to run into. So you're doing all this great job, right? You're building good awareness, you're building a brand identity, you're getting the word out there, you're hitting different channels, you're building relationships with people, right? Trying to help them, doing all things the right way, delivering the messages, all the stuff that we know works. It may take a little bit of time, but it works. It works beautifully. And now, you all of a sudden, after maybe a couple months go on, and now you're starting to see that demand, on the website come through. People are starting to reach out. And, let's say, for example, that a bunch of these particular buyers are much more stringent, whether they're enterprise or not, they're much more stringent in terms of what they require from the people that sell to them. And now all of that work that you're doing, they might actually tell you to stop. It's like, you actually have to stop the count, we can't take pipeline, not because I once had an issue with a rare situation where too many leads for the SDRs and the AEs. That was, I think I've told you both about that one. That was in a laundromat space, rare situation. But instead of that, now you're running into a bottleneck because this business, well, this is awesome. You're doing a great job communicating with these people and getting on their radar. But, oh man, we actually can't handle working with them. We actually don't pass their requirements. We are not able to do that. And now, if that was my TAM, or let's say that was my ICP in Q1 or whatever, and I'm targeting all these people, and now they come to me and they say, oh wait, we actually can't do business with them. That's a disaster. So like, I'm still learning about, what this means. Like we're talking about operational maturity and cybersecurity is a growth lever, all these things that I've been thinking about messaging wise, but like, I'm still learning about what it means to be under the hood. But what I do know from the GTM standpoint is that, from working with so many of these companies on my end, I was never part of these conversations. Even my POCs weren't, whether they were the head of the marketing, head of revenue, because that function is still siloed outside of the go-to-market, right? So I think of like that aspect. It's like, I'm here. I have a fire under my ass to grow ARR up the wazoo. I have no runway. And you know what? The best part is the end of the runway is filled with crap that I can't even see. That if I do all of this and now I drive the right people, now, oh, wow, we can't even do business with them. That would be my fear. No,
you're right. Here's the thing though. That drives business for other people because I've literally had, I had an ad firms, what they would be, a marketing company who had, I don't know, maybe probably less than 100 people and like one IT person. And they win this really big contract with this large entity. And they've got like 4 pages of T's and C's and 8-point font. And it's like security monitoring, cybersecurity insurance, all this stuff. And they're like, hey, we need to do all this stuff now. So
yeah. It's like, look, I don't want to do that. I'm not even much of a football expert to do it, but you don't want to get down into the red zone, into the 1 yard line and realize you don't have someone that could run the ball in. You know what I mean? Like that you need to make sure as much as you can that the field is cleared for growth. we are thinking of so many things on the go-to-market side. We have so many things that we have to be considerate of, and so much that we have to do. Well, obviously, you straddle both of those lines, right? So that would be my concern. I can control what I control, but I only can control what I can see and what is visible to me and the people that I work with. If I was a startup and I wasn't, let's say I wasn't being mature enough operationally from my technology and security standpoint, that's a huge concern for me. That'd be a red flag. That might be a question I ask in an interview: is how are you thinking of it as a growth pillar? Because honestly, it's a limitation of growth. So that's the kind of message I have for people in the startup audience on the GTM side, is that ask the question to the people that own those. Well, there's the dangerous question. The people that own what? Ownership is blurred all over the place as well, which is a whole nother conversation to unpack. Who actually owns all of these tools that we're using to grow? That's a whole nother conversation. We don't need to go down that path, but you get my point. That's how I think of it, though.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, because I talk to mostly cybersecurity startups, so they're very aware of the security of the tool, that things have to be secure. But and I think in fintech, those folks know too. But there's probably a whole lot of other people who, I get it. You're in the chaos. I need MVP. I need to get voice of the customer client. I need feedback. I've got to iterate and grow. I don't have time to build security into it. And this is so Steve, I know you and I both are going to say the same thing, which is you do it as soon as possible. You do it at the beginning. But reality speaking, the way that the actual industry works, for these startups, when do they actually start to do cybersecurity?
Yeah. So obviously, yeah, we hope to get to get it ingrained from the beginning. Reality is not until customers start demanding it, is what
we usually
what
have.
I've seen. And the I don't know what the right word is, but the level of effort is not as, we're talking about a whole bunch of things, compliance and secure code review. There's a whole ton of stuff that an organization should be doing to have a mature cybersecurity program. But really, at the end of the day, it's a little bit simpler. I mean, the basic blocking and tackling, if I build on a Chris, your football reference there, right, is very, very doable if out of the gate, if you can just get the time and the focus, and that's really the part of the issue, right? As you're saying, sort of the time to market. We got to get the MVP, voice of the customer. We got to get a bunch of anchor clients, and then we got to scale from there, right? And the pace at which the business is moving in those early stages just doesn't leave a lot of room, for building in that security. But still hopeful that that we can get more companies there than are currently doing it.
Yeah, I think to your point, we all know they're not all going to do it again. They should do it at the beginning, but they should do it as soon as possible. The longer you wait, the harder it's going to be, and the more impact it's going to have on you. It's similar to what I say about planning and GRC even too. People want to. I'm sure Steve and I have had the exact same experience. You walk in to go talk to whoever, and they're like, "I have this problem. What technology do I buy to fix it?" It's not a biotechnology. It's let's talk about the business and the process and where things are going, because the technology is probably not going to fix your problem, right? So it's that idea of understanding that you need to look at the whole picture and think about the impact of things before. But to your point, also, because it made me think of another conversation I had about secure by design, and as a technology company, SaaS or otherwise, it's your responsibility to build a secure product and have a secure, right? And well, it should be, but a lot of us as buyers of technology now get the onus put on us to monitor it and deal with vulnerabilities and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out next couple of years.
I have a sort of similar kind of question where, how do you know if you've waited too long? And I've had a circumstance or two where the client's customers told them about it, identified a vulnerability, right? So I view that as like, if that scenario comes up, well, you've waited too long to really get things going in an effective way.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing with like, oh, we found a vulnerability, and then there's another where like we found all of your like these like tons of security flaws. And again, if you're dealing with mature organizations as clients, they're going to evaluate the security of your product, solution, whatever it is. They're going to ask you about your DevSecOps or your SDLC. They're going to ask you about your patch management. I remember decades ago, before I was in consulting, when I was on the buying side and asking a company who was doing custom labor management systems. And I was like, what do you guys do for cybersecurity? Like, how do you evaluate code? Like, oh, we have Microsoft updates. We update the server. I was like, no, man, like all of the code that you wrote, your massive application that's going to be in all of our thousands of stores. How do you make sure that's secure? Back then, application security was not as much of a thing.
Microsoft is the OG of insecure coding.
It's good stuff. Well, guys, it's been awesome hanging out with you for a while. Where can people find you on the interwebs? How can they get in touch?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn. It's funny every time you ask this, with long tail slugs. But we'll be definitely sharing LinkedIn profiles. Steve is a very interesting follow for so many different reasons, for so many different types of people, honestly, and he's very active with posting. So I would highly advise, if you're interested in learning more about anything we talked about today, follow Steve. We're always starting conversations and always wanting to have more and more with people. So I would say there, LinkedIn, baby.
Outstanding. I appreciate you guys. This has been awesome.
You too, man.
Alrighty. Thank you for the time.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. Follow Will and the podcast on LinkedIn /WillClue. Visit WillClue.me for information on services he offers to help your cyber or tech business grow. Until next time, Synaculator.